What's up, everyone? Welcome into the Dear Miss Fantasy show with me, your host, Tara Roberts. This is the official mailbag show for Player Profiler. It is Wednesday, March 25th, and we are officially less than a month out from the NFL draft. So I thought it would be the perfect time for us to do a rankings update. So we're post free agency. We've got all of those changes in, all the trades and whatnot. And then, go ahead and do the rankings before I have to switch everything up again in just a month because of the draft. But I've got rookies in here too, obviously, aside from the running backs. A lot of these rookies, because I have images. For those of you listening on the podcast, you can either watch the YouTube video to see the images, or you can also just go and watch or look at my entire rankings. It's in my link tree, and then you can find it on the Fantasy Pros rankings as well. So you can find them there. But otherwise, you can just look at them here on the YouTube show. But I've got graphics of our top 24, obviously, with the exception of the running back position. None of those rookies are going to be in there. Obviously, one rookie is in my top 24 running backs. We'll see where I have him ranked as of right now. But we'll talk about, I'll also look and get some deeper rankings for you guys and call out where those guys are, because it's going to be very interesting. Like right off the bat here, in terms of what I'm seeing, last year, my approach to drafts was very robust RB. I thought, we have plenty of options in terms of wide receiver threes that would be able to hit. Tight ends were plentiful. High end options at quarterback were cool. But ultimately, what I wanted to do in the first couple of rounds, really in the first 4 rounds last year, was walk away with 2 running backs right off the bat. So you don't have to worry about it, because there was a clear drop off, a clear cliff where things got a little bit shaky. And obviously that played out kind of exactly as we thought, where the guys that were being drafted in kind of like that RB 20 to 24 range, your David Montgomerys, your Travion Hendersons, your who else was in there? RJ Harvey's, right? They all got drafted super high to be starting running backs right off the bat. And those obviously ended up not being reliable options for the majority of the season there. So robust RB was what ended up working out. So that was really cool. So out of the first 4 rounds, I was always coming out with 2 running backs, which is kind of not my traditional approach. I hate robust RB almost as much as I hate zero RB. I don't like to worry about running backs. I prefer a hero RB strategy right in the middle. That's me, right in the middle of everything. Nothing too extreme, very lukewarm strategies, right? We're not taking things to an extreme. I like a nice hero RB strategy. Start me off with a running back, and then I love to load up on wide receivers. But I had to take a different, I'm very flexible. And if the ADPs and rankings are looking like you have to switch up your draft strategy, I will do that. And I did that last year with going robust RB. We're going to have to switch up again, guys, because as I was going through my rankings and updating them, there were some very clear cliffs, unfortunately, at both running back and wide receiver. So that is going to pose an issue, because the same cliff kind of exists at running back that we had last year. Obviously, there are just different players that are mixed in there now. But unfortunately, that cliff also exists at wide receiver. It gets a wee bit shaky once you get towards that top 20, or towards the end of that top 20. It starts looking like the running backs, where you're sitting there thinking, oh, I don't know how comfortable I feel with all of these guys. So we're going to have to do some creative strategy shifts as well, because nabbing one of those high-end receivers and a high-end running back is going to be critical, and probably getting, maybe taking a little risk at running back, but also locking down a strong wide receiver too, because of that clear, very weird cliff. And we'll show the rankings and we can talk about it, right? But honestly, as we'll start off at quarterback here. As I look at quarterbacks and tight ends, unfortunately, we might have to push those and fade those top guys who I love, right? But we might have to push back a little further, because we have more depth at quarterback and more depth at tight end. Crazy, yes, but we have more depth at tight end. So maybe we push those back a little bit and focus on our premium positions of running backs and wide receivers and stack up on those. So let's talk it through and let's look at the quarterbacks, and then we'll kind of understand why we've got some good depth at quarterback this year. Jump into the comments here real quick. They're from Raft Has. What's up? Well, welcome everyone in the chat. If you got any questions or any comments or anything, all your opinions, drop them in the chat, of course. Raft Raf2Taz says hello, and also that you took Josh Allen #1 overall. Josh Allen's never a bad bet, right? Of all the quarterbacks that we got on the list, I mean, he'll always be the first overall. He's never a bad bet. Any decision to draft, Josh Allen is always a premium decision on that one. So yeah, Josh, love him. And honestly, I'm rarely one to take first quarterback off the board. But no lie, I did have Josh Allen last year. Very surprising. Very surprising. But hey, value sometimes presents itself. Yeah, trying to take running backs within the first 4 to 5 rounds. Yeah, we're going to have to look at that again. Same there, right there. And then Albert Moroccan, what's up in the chat? All right, let's dive in. Show my nice little graphics there. Obviously, let me take off my banner there for you guys. As I always remember, you can't see the full rankings if I show my banner. All right, there. My nice little graphic that I don't make. That is auto-generated. Thank you so much for that. But there we go. Make it full screen so I can see it. All right, we've got obviously Josh Allen right off the bat here. Number 2 and 3, it's not dramatic, right, in terms of differences between your top 5 and whatnot. Honestly, they're all fantastic, right? I flip back and forth on Drake May and Lamar Jackson. Drake May, obviously, very deserving of that 2nd overall spot there. And Stephon Diggs exiting, transition to Romeo Doubs. I think it's kind of a wash in terms of I think that Romeo Doubs at this point in his career, it will probably be a more effective wide receiver one than Stephon Diggs was. And Stephon handled volume pretty well and had plenty of receptions. So I don't mind that at all. Obviously, the rushing upside is a plus as well. And obviously, it does seem like New England is very open to an additional wide receiver, whether they're, trying to push for that trade for A.J. Brown or perhaps drafting a wide receiver. They don't draft wide receivers well, so I hope they don't draft a wide receiver. End up with another, no offense, we ended up with another, we're going to draft the fastest guy in the draft and see how that works out. Okay, we'll see. But again, I do think they might add another receiver there, and obviously that can only benefit Drake May. And we do need some offensive line adjustments there. But Lamar Jackson, I do have him just a smidge higher there. One, I do like the transition to Declan Doyle as offensive coordinator. I love that. I think that'll be good. Not that no offense to Todd Monken. I think Todd Monken gave us some awesome years of Lamar Jackson, but fresh minds in there. And obviously Declan is bringing over a very fine system as well. From Chicago. So we feel good about that. Lamar Jackson, when he is healthy, regardless of the team maybe not being the best all year long, even at the beginning of the season when Lamar Jackson was healthy, they were looking shaky as a whole. The defense was looking extremely shaky, although we do expect with Jesse Minter that there will be an improvement on defense, so that should help there. But Lamar Jackson, for all the troubles that the team had, when he was healthy, he was still putting up top 5 numbers. So it's always just a gamble of whether or not he's going to give us a full season. I trust him, and the upside is high enough that he's still a top quarterback for me. After that, we've got Joe Burrow, who ironically has the same issue as Lamar Jackson as well. He's arguably less reliable from a health perspective than Lamar Jackson. But obviously, when you're sitting there throwing to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I mean, come on there. And then, of course, their defense is going to be terrible again. So we'll have plenty of volume for Joe Burrow. So very worthy of that top 5. Number 5, Jalen Hurts. I think I'm slightly higher than consensus on this one. Reason for that is that I do expect the offense to bounce back. We'll talk about that with Saquon Barkley. But obviously, we've got to transition to a new offensive coordinator, Sean Mannion. I like him. I feel positive things about Sean Mannion as an offensive coordinator. Mainly because he has played in and come from good systems. So he theoretically should hail from that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree in terms of concept for offensive schemes. So I think that'll be a very good system to bring in there for Jalen Hurts and will benefit Jalen Hurts overall as well. So plus his rushing upside. Last year was just a weird down year from an offensive perspective. So Jalen Hurts still at number 5, expecting the bounce back season here. Jaden Daniels, obviously, we're expecting a bounce back season, and it wasn't just the injury there, unfortunately. There was the second-year regression, but we kind of expected that. We thought that the rushing upside would carry him through over the second-year regression. Sorry if you guys can hear a dog going crazy in the background. Apparently, there's someone trying to get home from work and come into the house and has not moseyed into the house at an appropriate time frame here. So the dog keeps barking. But I don't know if you guys can hear that or not, but it's like ringing in my ear constantly. Ugh. But Jaden Daniels, second-year regression, it did hit him, unfortunately, there before he did suffer that injury. But he wasn't alone in that. We've seen the second-year regressions happen at this point. We just kind of expect them. And I still feel good about Jaden Daniels rushing upside enough to warrant him at number 6. I go back and forth between him and Trevor Lawrence, to be honest. Trevor Lawrence is my number 7 there. Trevor Lawrence, I feel extremely positive about in a probably audacious, ridiculous way. I will be higher. We talk about risers and fallers here. I will be higher on Trevor Lawrence. He is rising in my rankings. He is rising as we speak. He is rising as I think. And obviously, you guys know Trevor Lawrence, I would be, categorized as a stan, but it's not because of that. It's because I truly believe in Liam Cohen. Obviously, what he did with that offense last year, I feel like he took Trevor Lawrence to another level. It took maybe about half a season for him to kind of get his bearings in that offense, right? And obviously had to deal with, bringing along, we had the Travis Hunter developing and going back and forth on offense and defense. And we had Brian Thomas Jr. with the unfortunate regression there. So the offense wasn't at its peak form, but kind of caught fire and found itself in the back half of the season. Obviously, the emergence of Parker Washington and Jacoby Myers trade was fantastic for him. We finally got really good usage out of Travis Etienne. We'll talk about Travis Etienne in a second too, in terms of his receiving work as well. So overall, Liam Cohen did just a fantastic job with that team. I know we have been bamboozled by Trevor Lawrence in a later half of the season surge before, right? Moved him up in rankings and for him to only be disappointing there. But the continuation of this offense here is what makes me feel very positive about it. So this is, belief in Trevor, but really more of a belief in Liam Cohen in general. Also, for all the weirdness that we're going to have from a fantasy perspective when it comes to the receiving core, and I don't like that we lost Travis Etienne, right? That'll be interesting. We'll talk about Bhayshul too. We can talk about Bhayshul too in a second. But we're looking at Trevor Lawrence and the pass catchers, right? We need another pass. We need to see if Bhayshul Tuten can actually be reliable as a receiving option, a high-end receiving option in this offense. Otherwise, they might add another option as a receiving back. But Trevor has a bevy of weapons. Unfortunately, when we look at wide receiver rankings, Travis Hunter will not be there. He will be nowhere near the top 24. He will not be in the top 50 because it's looking, unfortunately, like he is going to be primarily used on defense. I hate that for dynasty people that drafted him in non-IDP leagues. I did draft him in one dynasty league. It was an IDP league, so I feel okay about that. It's still a little egregious for a second overall pick, but that's our second overall rookie pick in rookie drafts, but still, that's all right. But at the end of the day, we're looking at this receiving core of maybe Travis Hunter contributing every now and then, but primarily it's going to be Jacoby Myers, who got the extension, yay for him, Brian Thomas Jr., Parker Washington, and honestly, Jacoby Myers has been reliable. Parker Washington and the connection that we saw with Trevor Lawrence was fantastic last year. I will be very high on Parker Washington as one of the better value picks for us in drafts. But it'll be very interesting to see if Brian Thomas Jr. can bounce back. He did look like he kind of found himself at the end of the season. So hopefully we're not looking at a complete Elijah Moore type of disappearance there, but I trust that we should be okay here. It's a well-rounded receiving core. That also does not include Brenton Strange as well. So it's really a deep pass catching group here that Trevor will have to work with. So we feel good about him progressing overall. We saw the uptick in usage of his legs as well. That helps him from a fantasy perspective and what gives him a little bit of an edge here in terms of my ranking. So Trevor Lawrence is someone who I would definitely be higher on than consensus. Justin Herbert at number 8. Again, we're still waiting on the ultimate progression of Justin Herbert to what we originally saw in his rookie season, right? But finally, we've got this Mike McDaniel offense that we're going to have here. We're going to have more pass volume. We've got, we'll see. It's interesting. They can either go the route of sticking with Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, and Trey Harris. Obviously, we don't know if at some point Keenan Allen will re-sign, or if they add another pass catcher via the draft is very possible as well. But he's got a very deep group as well, underrated group in my opinion. And then Aronde Gadsden, Amari Hampton is excellent as a pass catcher. They added Keaton Mitchell is a potential pass catcher as well, which is very interesting in a Mike McDaniel offense. So plenty of weapons here. We should see increased volume. Justin Herbert behind a healthy offensive line is a positive thing. Then with number 9, we've got Caleb Williams. I think I'm slightly lower than Caleb. Let me see if I've got it pulled up. Where is Caleb Williams in consensus rankings right now? No, okay. I thought I was a little bit lower. Caleb Williams is number 9 in consensus rankings and number 9 with me. If we get a healthy Patrick Mahomes, I could switch that up. But for right now, Caleb is up there. Again, plenty, exit of DJ Moore, benefits us from a fantasy perspective, does make a little dent in terms of, overall depth for Caleb Williams, but really they've got plenty of options there. Ultimately, it's a very balanced offense. So you do get those games where his upside is not, in order for him to win the game, he doesn't have to throw aggressive volume. That's the only issue. If he were a high volume thrower, like if I could say that I was going to get, a Joe Burrow level volume out of Caleb Williams plus his rushing upside, that would easily make Caleb Williams a top 5 pick for us. But unfortunately, our top 5 ranking here for us. But unfortunately here, it's not always aggressive volume as we saw last year. So no issue with him. It's just the fact that there will be volume inconsistencies because they like to be very balanced and can lean on the ground game as well. And no changes in the ground game, which is very interesting, very cool for us from a fantasy perspective. After that, Patrick Mahomes, obviously we saw the big uptake in usage on the ground from him last year. We would expect that might come down this year. So Patrick Mahomes, though, again, he's Patrick Mahomes. So you go with a QB1 for him, even coming off the injury. Although we did get an update that he seems to be on track, perhaps a little bit early here. So we're crossing our fingers that he'll be ready to start the season because that is very critical for our Rashee Rice. Very critical for his rankings, provided he legally stays on the field. After that, number 11, Dak Prescott. Dak, again, I love him. He is very worthy of being higher ranked. Especially if George Pickens is not traded. It looks like we could, because I haven't really heard any kind of drama or fodder or anything of any issues. If he's willing to play on the tag, I probably will bump Dak up a little bit there. The only issue is that obviously occasionally Dak will straight up disappear, right? And so that makes him a little bit more volatile than some of these other quarterbacks, like a Caleb Williams, who I know won't disappear, right? But in terms of volume, and overall touchdown upside, Dak is very worthy of being a QB1. Jackson Dart at number 12 for me. I am noticeably lower on Jackson Dart. I'll explain real quick for you guys. Jackson Dart is ranked 7th in consensus rankings right now. So with me at number 12, that's a pretty dramatic difference there. And it's no offense to him. I think he's very talented. The rushing upside is fantastic. He will be getting Malik Neighbors back. That is amazing. Logically and theoretically, right? We should have, it's very possible that Jackson Dart could be on that progression that we saw Drake May on, right? Because it's a very similar story, right? You have a, talented quarterback drafted to a bad team, no wide receiver 1 because Malik Neighbors got in. I'm going to just FYI, I'm going to butcher Malik Neighbors and Malik Willis all season. So just bear with me on that one. Malik Neighbors has got the injury very early in the season. So we literally didn't even get to see a full game of Jackson Dart and Malik Neighbors together. So very similar to Drake May, who just straight up didn't have a wide receiver 1 in his rookie season. Again, offensive line could have been better. Run game was not fantastic for the majority of the season, due to, Cam Scatterbo injury and whatnot. And then just overall, defunct situation of the team as a whole, fired head coach, yada, 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 right? So logically, Jackson Dart does fit into that exact same Drake May mold, whereas I was super cool with drafting Drake May last year because second year regression really only applies to people who had something to regress from, right? So that would have been Bo Nix and Jaden Daniels. Drake May didn't have anything to regress from because he was, pushing from the bottom, right? In terms of his overall team situation. Jackson Dart, same situation. The problem that I have here is that a lot of Drake May's progression, and we laugh at Josh McDaniels and we criticize him as a head coach for sure. Josh McDaniels as a head coach, never, ever, ever, right? But he's a fine offensive coordinator. And obviously he worked very well with Drake May. I think that is the key there in terms of what makes me very skeptical of this Jackson Dart progression to the point where we can trust him as a potential top 6-7 option there. The problem is that we have got Matt Nagy as an offensive coordinator. And are we to really trust Matt Nagy as a guy that can be trusted to develop a young quarterback? I don't think so. I don't feel positively about it. So if I don't trust Matt Nagy to be consistent, and I won't say it won't be a disaster, but if I don't trust Matt Nagy to truly develop Jackson Dart from a pass perspective, right, then I can't put him up ahead of guys like Justin Herbert or Caleb Williams. I can't logically do that, right? I could move Jackson Dart because of the rushing upside above a Dak Prescott or a Patrick Mahomes because of the injury, but that's my cutoff right there. I can't trust him above guys that I know can put up volume, have stable volume, and have good coaching situations. That's the difference there. And the problem is that, if you look at a team that has, offensive coordinator struggles, right? Occasionally you will see a situation where, okay, like me as a head coach, I'm just going to take over play calling. Unfortunately, John Harbaugh can't do that. So we are stuck with Matt Nagy for the duration of the year. So that is my only apprehension here. I hope that I'm wrong because I've got a nice little dynasty share of Jackson Dart on my best contender. So I need him at peak level. But unfortunately, it's not my ideal situation. I think we'll still see volatility. So we'll see those spike games, and then the games without the rushing touchdown might look a little bit ugly because the pass volume, again, might not be to the level that we wanted. And again, that's hard to imagine with Malik Nabers, but we do have to remember that Nabers will be coming off of his injury. Nabers and Jackson Dart might not have that natural chemistry because, unfortunately, Jackson Dart was not preparing as the starter last year. And again, we did not get them preparing or to play a season together. So this is kind of new territory. And now he's rehabbing off of an injury. Jackson Dart's going to be spending a lot of time with, Isaiah Likely and Darnell Mooney. So, it'll be very interesting to see what that connection actually looks like when they get onto the field together. And then 13 through 24, we'll go through it really quick. Obviously, Brock Purdy, stable. Matt Stafford returning, stable. Bo Nix, that's just a good little spot for him. Obviously, he could, theoretically, in theory, we could bump him up a little bit because he has the dumbest amount of pass catchers right now. Like your wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 1 are Cortland Sutton and, Jalen Waddle. That's a solid crew right there. And then you have, for the depth, I really like there. I like Troy Franklin. I like Pat Bryant. I even like Marvin Mims a little bit, right? So he's got plenty of options there. And obviously, RJ Harvey is a fine pass catcher as well. So there's going to be volume. It's just what kind of bounce back do we have in terms of Bo Nix overall and putting up those elite fantasy numbers for us. Then Jordan Love, same situation. We saw regression last year. Jared Goff, just a good spot for him. Although I will say I'm very excited to see Jared Goff with Drew Petzing. Theoretically, Jared Goff and Jacoby Brissett, kind of similar play style, right? And we've seen in terms of the weapons that they have there with Amon-Ra and Sam Laporta. I think this could be a very interesting year for Sam Laporta. Drew Petzing coming over from having Trey McBride. You can just transition that naturally over to Sam Laporta. So this will be really good. I think we'll see, because the Detroit offense was a little off last year on occasion, which makes sense. You lose your offensive coordinator, and unfortunately, that got you there and really turned the offense around. And then you have a little bit of regression there. So we'll get a little bit of life injected back into this Detroit offense. After that, Tyler Shuck, I love him. Again, we got to be, a little bit apprehensive because, again, second-year regression. He actually did show very well in the second half of the season once he finally became the starter. But at rushing upside, assuming we're also going to get a weapon drafted there as a wide receiver too. So all positive things for him. Malik Willis there. That is one that Arguably, I could raise up a little bit higher, probably as we hit into draft season, because of the rushing upside that he has. Again, like I think I talked about it last week, or at the very least in one of my short videos. When we're looking at Malik Willis, based off of our very tiny sample size, right? Based off of that, we should be expecting 40 yards a game, just as period, as a baseline with Malik Willis. Logically, we should be getting a solid 4 fantasy points as a rushing upside, period, with yardage. And then the possibility of rushing touchdowns as well. It's just that the receiving core is non-existent. So we do need to figure out who exactly they're drafting there and verify that that player is not going to be a bust and that system is going to work out. And so I want to see Malik Willis live in action with whoever his wide receiver 1 is going to be, assuming that person is the 11th overall pick right there, just to see how that chemistry meshes, because I need him to have a solid wide receiver 1 in order to raise him up comfortably above a guy like Jared Goff. Then we've got Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett, you guys know I love him, our volume king. Jacoby Brissett, then Kyler Murray. That's a tentative spot right there. Honestly, probably won't move it up too much. I am assuming that he is going to beat out poor JJ McCarthy there. Honestly, ironically, guys, I have a dynasty team where I have both Kyler Murray and JJ McCarthy. So I'm kind of like, I wasn't using either one of them last year for obvious reasons. And so now one of them will win out here. And I'm like, okay, well, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, let's make it work. let's get it done. And then Baker Mayfield, CJ Stroud, and then Sam Darnold rounding it out there. And then obviously we've got a ton of guys that are in shifty quarterback situations. We got to figure out who exactly is the starter. Who's the Cleveland starter? Is it going to remain Shedeur? Obviously, the guys after this would be like Cam Wards and whatnot that are stable options. Does Aaron Rodgers return? And do we draft him? Obviously not into the top 20 or anything like that, but we'll see where he raises him. I'm going to jump now out of these rankings and jump to the comments to see what you guys have here. Yep, sadly. JPT, Matt Nagy is not good for Dart. I hate it. I like Jackson Dart. I want the best for him. I want the best for all of our young quarterbacks. Obviously, as I am a Trevor Lawrence fan, there is nothing worse than these young quarterbacks going into the league into situations where you have just poor coaching situations. The audacity of being drafted into these situations where they don't have somebody that can coach them up, which is, hey, for what it's worth, that's why we should feel a little bit more positive about Fernando Mendoza actually getting a good offensive-minded head coach. Thank goodness for him. Rarely happens as the first overall pick, right? You end up like your Caleb Williams sitting there with your bad coach, obviously, and trying to figure out, is there anything that can be done until we get a new coach in? So I'm worried about this whole Matt Nagy situation so much. Shout out in the chat to Bob Harris. Thank you for joining, Bob. I missed Bob. I miss my Sirius XM chats with Bob. Those are always fun. So shout out to Bob Harris. JPT Hertz seems high. Take away the tush push. I can never say that. His passing and run ability has significantly dropped the past 2 years. He's gone from QB3 to 8, now to 10 on keep trade cut. I don't disagree with the skepticism there. I don't disagree with it. If I could trust Jaden, his number 5 ranking is more of a trust thing. I know for sure he will get me a full top 10 season. Can I trust Jaden Daniels to do that? I don't know if I can. It's a little bit sketchy, right? This could very well go the CJ Stroud route. For what it's worth, I think he's going to bounce back, but it is entirely possible it goes the CJ Stroud route, right? Trevor Lawrence, again, I spoke very positively of him. Could I draft Trevor Lawrence over Jalen Hurts? Kind of the same situation of, do we trust Trevor Lawrence to, overall carry that same progression that he had through? Justin Herbert, arguably over Jalen Hurts. I could get behind that just because of, again, sheer volume there. And then Caleb Williams, obviously. So Jalen Hurts ranking at number 5 is more of he's the only one that I know for sure of that like grouping of guys after him outside of a healthy Patrick Mahomes, obviously, guys that I know for sure I can trust to get me as a top 10 option. So that's one that I've gone back and forth on. I don't love it. I would probably skip over him. And again, as we're looking at this list, back to draft strategy, right? As we are looking through this list, you guys can see why I might err on the side of we need to grab our running backs and our wide receivers early. We got to double up early in the first 4 rounds. 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, however you shake it out, that's fine. But we need to come out solid there. And after that, we can dive into our quarterbacks because there's nothing wrong with waiting and getting a Dak Prescott. As Miles Logan said, Dak airing it out again this season, right? So do I want to solidify those running backs and wide receivers and then say, okay, I feel super good about taking my chances with a Caleb Williams, a Dak Prescott, a Brock Purdy, right? A healthy Brock Purdy is always a fine, stable option. You got a Matt Stafford. Like there's guys. Or you can say, I'll wait even further and I will, let's say I draft the stability of a Bo Nix and the upside of a Malik Willis and I platoon. So there's different directions we can go at quarterback and bypass some of these higher end guys. So, with you, JPT on that one, 9 times out of 10 this season, unless we're maybe looking at Superflex, am I going to draft Jalen Hurts at number 5? I'm probably going to pass it up and go with some of the later guys. But my number 5 ranking for him there is just because he is purely one of the more stable options there. But for what it's worth, again, I do really like Sean Mannion, which I know feels weird. Obviously I'm a Packers fan, but he is well thought of from everything that I've seen. He is very well thought of in the league. He has been in excellent systems. And so everything that he has been in terms of systems has been nothing but those successful ones. So, the Kevin O'Connell systems, the Matt LaFleur systems, which, stem from Sean McVay and whatnot, or Kyle Shanahan and whatnot, played for Sean McVay. So he has good concepts. And I know some people are worried about what we saw last year with Green Bay, and that was not really any of a coaching issue as much as it was, again, weird injuries that they were dealing with, right? Not having Jaden Reed, dealing with Jordan Love having an injury, Josh Jacobs having an injury. We'll talk about as we go through wide receivers or as we go through running backs. But overall, like him as a head coach, and I am excited to see what he can bring to the Philadelphia Eagles. It'll be better than last year because I don't think you can get quite worse than that, can you? I don't think so. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that, though, as we talk about Saquon Barkley when we get to the running backs here in a second. From leaving, good question here. I'm going to go back through here to make sure, get a couple of these things, comments that I miss here. But from leaving, where's Tua with the laughing emoji? Tua, for what it's worth, I am giving the deference ranking higher to Michael Penix right now, but they're the same player to me. Tua is Tua's quarterback 34 for me. That's so sad. I don't want any piece of that, and I hate that. Right? I mean, we've talked about we've talked about it a lot in my videos. When it comes to Atlanta, I am literally only trusting Bijan and Kyle Pitts, as crazy as that is. But Kevin Stefanski, very proven and aggressive usage to his tight ends. So it feels like it's going to be a Kyle Pitts season, and we're getting good value at his ADP. I'm in on that. Like, if we're looking at the ADP, it's going to be a very nice mid-round pick. Don't have to reach it all. So I think that's a fine one as well. But yeah, that's it. And poor Drake London is probably going to get squashed by Kevin Stefanski and his love for what I think he will develop a true love and crush and deep romance with Kyle Pitts there. Let's see here. From leaving, Hurts, no. Brown doesn't seem to want to run as much. Like Caleb Williams and Lawrence a little better. And I wouldn't be mad at you for that, for passing over Jalen Hurts and just over Jalen Hurts for Caleb and Trevor Lawrence. Now, I am ranking him as though AJ Brown is not leaving. If he were to leave, yeah, that's going to come down. But at the same time, just know if they were to let go of AJ Brown and I would think it would happen like right before the draft or maybe during the draft if they did that, they would be doing so to draft a receiver. So there would be another weapon that would be added, and probably another more motivated weapon that would be added. Let's see here. Make sure I got all the comments from Linswell. Agree with your list somewhat, but replace Jackson Dart at 12 with Sam Darnold at 24. Ooh, that's spicy. Jackson Dart is a good player, but he needs to be groomed. Dart spent more time in the blue tent than on the medical field. That's a spicy take. I'm not mad at it. The rushing upside for he needs to be more groomed, and then that comes down to the Matt Nagy issue that we know that Matt Nagy cannot develop a quarterback. I hate that. Like it was one of the most illogical hirings, right? Doesn't make a ton of sense to me. Maybe Harbaugh knows something I don't. I mean, he's a better NFL coach than me, right? But from what I've seen, I just don't think that Nagy is going to be the right one to develop. So that's a spicy take, but it is very sound in logic. From JPT, Knicks has 2 back-to-back top 10 fantasy seasons. With Waddle now, I think he's on for a third. I have both Hurts and Knicks. I'm hopeful for both guys. Yeah, that's a good and that's a good combination there because both are very stable options, and hopefully we can get that bounce back from Knicks. You guys know I loved Bo Nix I really much so loved Bo Nix last season in draft season, and particularly Cortland Sutton. So 2025 is a big letdown for me with Cortland Sutton, but the addition of Waddle is only going to help there for Bo Nix. It'll make it just a nasty receiving core for us. I don't want any piece of that. We'll look at rankings in a second, but for wide receivers. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see if any of them are in my top 24. Let's go to running backs here. Running backs. Running backs are always fun. Obviously, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, Devon Etienne at number 5. I know there's a lot of skepticism from some people around Devon Etienne, and I totally get that. But I will say this really quick. I'm not moving him back because of Malik Willis. The rushing upside there for him, I know that would be a little bit, worrisome in terms of saying, okay, well, I mean, he's going to steal goal line opportunities. Well, HN wasn't really checking in at the goal line anyway. So it was not the rushing touchdowns. In fact, I do not have those stats up. I might have pulled them up on the last. We might have talked about this on the last show. Red zone touches were not his bread and butter. I think I might have talked about this in a video. I can't remember. But red zone touches were not his bread and butter. So we don't have to worry about that. Anything that Malik Willis is going to do has very little impact on HN. What I do like about Malik Willis's impact on HN is having a running quarterback there that is mobile to the level of Malik Willis is going to open things up for Devon Etienne. It should limit the ability for them to stack the box. They're going to have to defensively spy and pay attention on Malik Willis. And what I'm really interested in is if we get Malik Willis in play action and we get a lot of pass volume to Devon Etienne as well. So it should open things up for him, despite the fact. And again, we're going to have a receiver added. So don't worry, guys. I would bet pretty hefty amount of money that we will get a pass catcher drafted at 11 for the Dolphins there. At that point, they will have their pick of at least 2 of the top 3 receiving prospects there. And then again, they could also go with Kenya Sadiq as well if they want to go that direction and lead with tight end. But he'll have a new pass catcher, probably a couple. They're not rolling with that receiving core as is. So it'll be fresh, it'll be young, it'll be a little rebuild here. But more importantly, again, the rushing upside is going to make sure that things are wide open there for Devon Etienne. And he has 0 problem with check down. So we'll be good here. After that, Saquon Barkley. I am in on the Saquon Barkley bounce back season. I am higher than consensus on him. This is where I get a little bit different because everybody, my top 5 are the same as, let's see. My top 5, let me click on the right page here. My top 5 at running back are almost the same as consensus. Consensus is Bijan, Gibbs, McCaffrey, Taylor, James Cook. I will talk about that in a second. And then Devon Etienne. Where I get different is I'm a little bit higher on Saquon Barkley and obviously a little bit lower on James Cook. My reasoning for being higher on Saquon Barkley is that I try not to live and die by regression because Like some of that is not always 100%, right? But when it comes to running backs, even the most talented running backs coming off of stupid workload seasons, they often underperform. So we had a Saquon Barkley in 2024 with well over 300 carries in C. I think it was over three. I think it was 345, over 340 carries in the regular season. Then ton of carries in the run for the Super Bowl. So it was just one of the dumbest amount of workloads we'd ever seen, right? He had over 2,000 yards on the ground. Logically, he was going to regress. You physically cannot repeat. The odds are that you just don't straight up repeat that. So what we saw is a very aggressive dip in his overall effectiveness and overall usage as well. So when I was looking at the stats here, we're talking about a guy, 345, who had 345 carries in 2024, plus 33 receptions, plus his postseason work, right? 15 touchdowns, over 2,000 yards. 2025, only 280 carries, and obviously just a little over 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns, and a little bit of an uptick in receiving work, but not much. 37 receptions there, but really that 280 carries plus going out in the first round helps as well. We got Saquon coming off of a much lighter workload. This is very reasonable for him. I would expect a bounce back here. And again, expecting a bounce back because the system just straight up did not work last year. And so we're liking the coaching changes here in the bounce back for Saquon to be Saquon Barkley again. He's Saquon, guys. It was just, I very much so am a believer that if you get a running back pushing over 330 carries, odds are that he's going to be hurt in the next season and just going to be ineffective, unfortunately. So we like him for the bounce back here. Ashton Jeanty at number 7 there. Obviously, we will go through some growing pains here with this Vegas offense. I don't expect things to turn around immediately. They're even saying that they don't know that they'll start Fernando Mendoza right off the bat. I just, I think that's talk, but whatever. But at the end of the day, what we will see in terms of a far better offensive scheme here, far better, superior in like 1,000 times better, that will be able to utilize Ashton Jeanty in a better way, get him working on the outside there. And then also the receptions. He was fine on receptions last year, but we'll have some more effective utilization here. So I feel very good about Ashton Jeanty and the pure volume that we'll get. And more importantly, more so than anything, they're rebuilding that offensive line. And that's the key there. So we got a better system, better quarterback, cross our fingers, and better offensive line. Just the system and offensive line are enough for us to say, okay, we're good. We're good on Ashton Jeanty, and we feel like much more positive because nobody could run in that offense last year, unfortunately. After that, we've got James Cook at number 8 here. For people that are not, again, podcast reminder, you can always go to Fantasy Pros Rankers. So you can always go to the Fantasy Pros rankings and click my name somewhere. I don't know exactly where, but in my link tree, I link it as well. If you want to see these all out, the entirety of my draft rankings. But James Cook at number 8, I've bumped him back a little bit. And I hate to do that because I do trust James Cook. At this point, there's no reason to fade James Cook because of Josh Allen. We have got multiple seasons here where it is very clear that James Cook will get his from a touchdown perspective alongside Josh Allen doing whatever he wants. So that is not an issue. I'm not concerned that we're going to see an increase in pass volume. I don't, the addition of DJ Moore is fantastic for the team. I don't think it's fantastic for us from a fantasy perspective. I don't think we're going to see an aggressive offensive philosophy change because Joe Brady has, run the system for a while now and it's been successful for them. So I don't think they will change it. But when we're looking at James Cook, he falls into that unfortunate Saquon Barkley category of, and not to the same extent, right? Not nearly to the same extent of usage. But this was the highest usage, unfortunately, of James Cook's entire career, which is pretty significant, again, for a smaller back. Like when you look at a Derrick Henry, you can say, okay, well, regression really doesn't hit him because he's just a massive human. But James Cook is a smaller back. We're talking about him finally, for the first time in his career, getting over 300 carries. And, obviously rookie season, whatever, right? But 2023 had 237 carries over 1,000 yards. 2024, 207 carries. Very efficient season in 2024. very efficient season. Just over 1,000 yards, 18 touchdowns. God, that was a fantastic season. 2025, you're jumping from 207 attempts to 309 attempts. 309 is not super aggressive in my mind for like, if you were to say a Bijan Robinson had 309 attempts. I'm like, whatever. Saquon had 309 attempts. It's just over 300. It's not that big of a deal. If we were pushing 350, that's a problem. But 300 for a back, James Cook's size, does make me a little concerned that we might see that same logical regression. But he's kind of right on the edge here. So I'm not going to discount him too much and fade him, because 300 is still very manageable. And it's not as if he had a ton of receiving work, only 33 receptions. But at the same time, we should just be a little aware that we could see a little bit slightly less efficient version of him. So just keep that in mind. So that's why I have him a little bit lower than consensus. So a couple spots further back. After that, I have Josh Jacobs. I feel good about Josh Jacobs in the same way that I feel about Saquon Barkley. Josh Jacobs is another person, unfortunately. And when it comes to Josh Jacobs, and let me see where Josh is in consensus, because I think I have him as my RB9. Consensus has him as RB13. And I think a lot of that skepticism comes because you could argue, because he is 28, that what we saw last year was regression in terms of age. And I don't think that's what it was. We've seen this before with Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs in 2022 in Vegas had 340 carries plus a stupid amount of receiving work, 53 receptions. That was a beautiful year. RB1 year. But when we're looking at that, right after that aggressive 340 carries season, he came down and had a god-awful, his worst season of his career, averaged 3.5 yards per carry, just 800 yards, was dealing with injuries off and on the entire season. It was ugly. It was nasty. We hated it. But obviously that was a usage regression situation, right? It's just kind of predictable in that way. 2024 goes to Green Bay, bounces back, over 300 carries, decent receiving work. And then unfortunately 2025, another regression, right? Crossed over that 300 carry mark. Again, bump up in usage. He had 16 touchdowns, so a lot of harder yardage as well. And unfortunately, it just wears and tear on you, and you see it in the following season. So he didn't look like his same efficient self. And it really more so showed as the season went on. At the beginning of the season, it was the easiest anytime touchdown bet. Was Josh Jacobs getting a touchdown? Yep. Check. Every single week, just touchdown after touchdown, very reliable. Then he started dealing with the injury, was playing through an injury. So if you're looking at his stats and saying he only had, under 900 yards, 234 carries. It was an ugly year, 15 games. You should have had theoretically more than that. Well, unfortunately, a lot of those games he was playing through an injury. The Packers were trying to make a playoff push right there, competing with, Chicago and Detroit. They were trying to make sure that they were the second in that division. And Josh Jacobs played through the injury very admirably, took one for the team, surprisingly, because, sometimes added, care with Josh Jacobs can be a little questionable. But really, you saw the level of effort that he put in to be on the field. And really, he probably should have sat through the majority of that injury. But he was trying to be out there, and there were games where literally he would play, made it like 4 carries, and then sat the rest of the way, unfortunately. So just not a good situation here. So a healthy version off of limited usage just screams bounce back there. So I do still like Josh Jacobs as a top 10 back. After that, Kenneth Walker. I think that's a good spot to have him for right now. We don't want to be too aggressive on him. Obviously, I do believe that he'll be utilized as a 3-down back. He was paid 3-down back money by Kansas City. I do believe he'll be used as a 3-down back. We'll have to see how this recovery goes for Patrick Mahomes, but that should theoretically benefit Kenneth Walker, because that can hopefully limit some of that rushing upside that Mahomes had, because Mahomes ran at an aggressive, like a ridiculous clip last season. So we should see some of that come off and go to Kenneth Walker there. So we feel good about that. And then with Patrick Mahomes' threat as a quarterback here, it'll be a very different situation than Seattle. Like, Kenneth Walker was effective in Seattle, but we can't deny that it's a lot easier to stack the box against Sam Darnold than it is against Patrick Mahomes, right? So we should see a little bit more open space for Kenneth Walker. So I think 10 is a very fine spot for him. Amarian Hampton at number 11. I'm a little bit lower I believe, on him than consensus. Let me double check here. Oh, I just messed up my stuff. Consensus has Amari Hampton at 8. I have him at 11. So that's not that bad. 3 spots there. Not really aggressive there. My only concern here is that I feel positive about the offense as a whole. We talked about this with what's his name? With with Justin Herbert. Feel positive about the offense as a whole under Mike McDaniel. But I do want to hear more from them in terms of philosophy on how this backfield will work, because it is entirely possible that there's another back that contributes from a receiving perspective. Marion Hampton, very capable receiver, did well after the catch, in my opinion. I don't have the stats for it up, but I would trust him as a 3-down back. I just need verification that they're not going to be using a change of pace back a little bit more than I would like to see there for me to bump him up into the top 10. So that's my only apprehension there. Chase Brown sitting pretty at number 12. Just a really nice, good spot for him. He continues to have no competition. We'll see if they, draft a running back. But at this point, we've got ample evidence that they trust him. They've no coaching changes, so they trust him. As the clear RB1 there. They're 3-down back. Derrick Henry, Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry. Hopefully we see a little more life from this offense. And with Lamar Jackson, if you look at Derrick Henry's stats last season, it was not a Derrick Henry falling off situation. The Ravens were just bad, and we know for a fact that Derrick Henry just becomes fantasy irrelevant when the team is playing from behind. So if your team is bad and struggling and you're playing from behind, it neutralizes Derrick Henry, unfortunately. So healthy Lamar Jackson, change in coaching staff. So get a bounce back here, get the team back on track and competitive. All things will be good for Derrick Henry. After that, Travis Etienne, I am going to be higher than. I can't figure out because right now his consensus ranking is RB 19, which is a bit peculiar for me, because that would make him that would mean that we are drafting guys like Kyron Williams, Bucky Irving over him. Javonte, I can understand, right? We'll see about Jeremiah Love. And Breece Hall. That's a lot of faith in terms of the bounce back there for the Jets. Travis Etienne is a very safe high-end RB2 for me. When we're looking at that New Orleans offense, I think the skepticism that people have in terms of Travis Etienne is the fact that, unfortunately, there's this view of the run game and how ineffective it was last year. And some of that obviously was Kamara going off a cliff, right? But also there was some weird usage. We did not really see it. Very little effective utilization of Alvin Kamara as a receiver. And we did see a little bit of a change as we got some of those Devin Neals and whatnot in there. But at the end of the day, that was mildly concerning. But again, you have to consider that you were dealing with a clearly regressed, unfortunately, Alvin Kamara, and then arguably having to start a lot of running backs that, you could say are just practice squad guys, right? So Travis Etienne, 3-down back in an offense that was moving forward very well with Tyler Shuck. We know that Kellen Moore is a good coach. Saw the team moving in a positive direction there. Travis Etienne can really, what I loved about the progression of Travis Etienne last year is, and it might go overlooked because the receptions weren't extremely high, but the clutch nature of his receptions is what really keyed in for me. We finally saw, and obviously change in location and coaching, right? But from capability perspective, we finally saw the Travis Etienne version that I saw in college, right? A guy that can truly be a dynamic pass catcher and a clutch pass catcher at that. When they needed a big play, these were not dump off checkdowns. And that's why it kind of goes overlooked from a stats perspective, is that we didn't have a whole bunch of checkdowns to Etienne. He was utilized. He was out there. Deep routes, right? He was utilized as a strong receiving option in clutch situations and pulled through. So that capability shining there on a team that does need additional pass catchers to go along with Chris Olave, I feel very good about. So Etienne is a very stable option for me as an RB2. So I will be a little bit higher on him, because once we start getting down here, again, Jeremiah Love will be kind of landing spot dependent. He's higher in consensus right now. I'm not going to move him up higher in consensus until I actually see what the landing spot is. We'll see. Obviously, looking like Tennessee, which is not a terrible situation. I would still very much so trust him as a top 15 back, but would just not overcommit on that one. And then, maybe the New York Giants if they make it past that. But after that, Javonte Williams is trustworthy. But after that is where I really get into this area of guys that I can't trust over Travis Etienne because I know the team situation and I know his volume situation. Breece Hall, unfortunately, has all the talent in the world. We've got a quarterback issue, right? Geno, maybe he's coming home and going to get into a better situation. Obviously, when we look at Vegas, for sure we know that it was a bad coaching situation for sure. But we've also seen Geno struggle over the past couple of years. So it more than likely is tilting towards more so the downturn of his career, right? So we've got, again, a bad situation, unfortunately. The defense is a total rebuild. They sold off their top end prospects. So this is a rebuilding situation, a running back in a rebuilding situation with a questionable quarterback. It makes me a little bit nervous because there's a lot of rebuilding to do. Kyren Williams, who I love, I've always stood for Kyren Williams. My problem is that I do think that is officially a very clear split backfield. And what we saw in the playoffs kind of really solidified that for me. Blake Corum is a constant presence in there. I don't know that this is going to change. And I will not be drafting what Kyren's ADP, it's ranking is RB 17 in consensus. So it's pretty normal. But I cannot really trust targeting a running back that I know is going to be splitting carries on a regular basis, even if I know that he's going to be getting constant touchdowns in that offense, right? Still, it just kind of caps your upside. So you're like, okay, cool. I can get a ceiling of 15 points and a floor of 10 points. But the oftentimes of you getting well above 20 is going to be a little bit of a problem there when you're splitting carries. After that, again, Bucky Irving, that is another one. That one is the most perplexing to me. I cannot and will not, under any circumstance, draft Bucky Irving over Travis Etienne. Sadly. And I hate that for him, but we'll have offensive coaching changes, obviously. But we saw, and I do think, maybe this changes with coaching, but philosophically, we've seen this kind of progressing in this way. Bucky Irving with the addition of additional backs, right? And them signing Kenneth Gainwell, who is arguably one of the most prolific pass catching backs in the league, right? And really just extremely trustworthy third down back, extremely trustworthy. It seems like they are clearly having him take over that Rachaad White role, and he is a far better version of Rachaad White. Sorry. He is. So I don't like that. They retained Sean Tucker, who is not fantasy relevant for us on a consistent basis, but has been effective at the goal line. So, we saw the increased usage of Sean Tucker. So it's a lot of bodies back there with Bucky Irving. So to trust him as the 3-down back there is a little bit worrisome for me. After that, David Montgomery, again, I do think that he's going to take on that Houston role as a 3-down back with a little bit of contributions from Woody Marks. After that, Bhayshul Tuten, I will need to see his ranking will be adjusted after the draft. I need to see what they do in terms of adding a running back. If they add a running back that has a higher receiving profile, that will worry me because Bhayshul Tuten was primarily utilized on the ground and as a goal line back, and he was very successful in that end, but they really did not incorporate him into the pass game. We know he can pass catch. We don't know how much they trust him as a blocker and as a receiver to the extent that they trusted Travis Etienne. So I need to see what type of running back they draft because I don't. Chris Rodriguez is not a threat. That's a duplication, and Bhayshul Tuten is a better version. I need to see if they add a pass catcher there through the backfield. After that, DeAndre Swift, again, the split there with Kyle Monangai, but there's enough volume to where you can arguably say he's low-end RB2. Travion Henderson does make me uncomfortable. Unfortunately, I don't want him ranked that high, but there's nothing that you can do about that because after that, you get into your injury situations with your Quinshawn Judkins, your Cam Scatterbo. You get into your split backfields with RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins, Jalen Warren and Rico Dowdle. What else is there? Chuba Hubbard, you can't trust him to be an RB1. Carolina clearly is not, can't be trustworthy in terms of leaning on one running back throughout the entire season. That's very, very clear at this point. They no loyalty at the running back position for Carolina, unfortunately. So Travion Henderson's ranking there is really just a last call for talent, a last call for someone who has upside and could theoretically push through as an RB1 potentially if all things go right. Jumping back to the comments here. From Black Lion, and I see we're like running out on time. I'll have to do wide receivers and tight ends on the next show, which is fine because we got a ton to talk about at wide receiver, ton to talk about, right? Because that is the position I'm worried about. Once you get outside like that top, once you get outside T. Higgins, things start to look a little sketchy. But Cam Scattaboo is ranked right now for me at he is consensus RB21, and he is ranked for me as RB20. Come on. 26. And that is because, one, I need to get past the draft and verify that, if the Titans do skip over Jeremiah Love, will the Giants make that? There was smoke around that being a possibility. So I would not put it past them. I need to get past them drafting an additional running back. And then I also want to see the progression there in terms of that injury. Because occasionally you come off of those types of injuries and, the surgery was, a little bit weird and you don't come back running the same you were. So I want to see him on the field and in action. And I also want to verify that they bypass a running back that can take over. From leaving, it's early, but Swift going to be a starter? I think so. I think Swift will be the starter. At this point, we made it through enough of a season where I trust that. The problem is that clearly Kyle Monangai is going to be a presence in the backfield. So it caps his upside. So he's worthy of a low-end RB2, but I can't push further than that because there will be days where he, gets 18 fantasy points, and then there will be days where it's like, I don't know, 5, unfortunately. Just because of the nature of the backfield. Let's see here. From Josh Hizzle, Bucky and my 103. Bucky and my 103 in Superflex for Lamar. Already have May, T-Law, and Field. Yeah, but your RBs are Genty and a bunch of hopefuls. I'm okay with that. I think that's an effective way to bail out on Bucky. Again, I just talked about him, the skepticism of the upside that he offers. And again, the years are creeping up in terms of, I don't have my 2027 free. Let me look at Bucky Irving contract. Bucky is through 2027. Okay. So we have one more year, but that's good because that will allow you to get out just like slightly early there. Especially if there's the potential of them maybe investing, which I don't think they'll invest in a running back this year, but, maybe bail out and capitalize while you can. So I don't, especially in this draft, 103 in this class, right? I think that's a perfectly fine trade for Superflex because, again, you'll be very deep with Lamar, Drake May, and Trevor Lawrence, but you do have to account for Fields being null and void now. So I'm okay with that. From Lindell Wells, putting Ashton Genty in top 10 is nasty work. King Henry, Breece Hall, Kyron Williams are rolling over in their bets at this list. Genty is nice, but wrong team. Genty is volume. Now, granted, again, we've got Mike McDonald coming over, obviously from a 2-back system, right? But they will have, there's no one really on roster. So I would assume that they might draft, maybe around 5 or so running back to play off of or, spell Ashton Genty because there's only so much volume you can give. But at the end of the day, volume is volume. And the only person that I could arguably place above him would be King Henry based off volume. But with Breece Hall, the team situation is just, Raiders situation is looking up. Breece is coming into a situation that looks like it might just be repeating what the Raiders did. Unfortunately, they might be going for that first overall pick. And we saw how playing alongside Geno Smith worked out last year for Genty. So I don't feel good about that for Breece Hall, sadly. And then Kyron, unfortunately, the split workload. Very stable running back. Trustworthy, RB2, not an issue. but the upside is capped, unfortunately, because the presence of Blake Corum is not going anywhere. The playoff run showed us that sadly, it's both of them contributing on a very consistent basis there. And then Josh Blicka with the follow-up, or Josh B. Hizzle with the follow-up. So the trade for, what was it? The Bucky and the 103 for Lamar, or try to bundle the 103 and Bucky for the 101. No, I would, that's tough because you could just go with, well, I mean, it depends on, I don't mind, especially, it depends on the scoring of your super flex league, right? As long as the scoring is such that QB2 is incredibly critical. I don't mind you going 3 deep with having Lamar there as well. Because, I mean, you could trade it for the 101. But at the end of the day, I think that Superflex wise, going ahead and making that investment into Lamar makes a lot of sense there. And I think the price is right. So I'm okay with that trade. I don't think maybe flipping for the 101, there's inherent risk. So I think I prefer the Josh Jacobs side. Not Josh, Lamar Jackson side of that one. But the 101 is reasonable too. And then Miles Logan had massive usage this past season. Woo, Marshawn Lloyd, be ready this season. Josh had massive touchdowns, which was awesome, but he only had 230 something carries. So his workload was down a lot to where it had been. That was pretty low. But I will say this. I would anticipate the Packers draft a running back round 4 or later. Marshawn Lloyd, sadly, has not shown the reliability to stay on the field. I doubt that they trust, and they do have Chris Brooks still on roster, I believe. But with Emmanuel Wilson gone, my gut tells me, especially if anyone's holding on to those Marshawn Lloyd dynasty shares and maybe thinking, that something can come of them, especially with, thinking, okay, well, Josh is 28 now. Last season felt like a little bit of a bust. Maybe it's Marshawn Lloyd's season. I would capitalize on any thought process on that and trade it away. I would have really, really assumed that they will draft a running back that could be the replacement backup running back there. So I'd just be a wee bit cautious on that one, just because Marshawn Lloyd, talented in theory, hey, we know he's talented, but we have zero evidence he can stay on the field. I hate to see that with players, but unfortunately, I think he just has one of those bodies, unfortunately, that is not holding up the way that we would like it to. For an injury as a running back, for your hamstring to be taking you out like that, it's a wee bit of a concern there, just overall back-to-back injuries like that. But yeah, Josh's usage was really low. So I think he'll bounce back to having that overall 300 plus carries. That's ideally where I think they would like to see him. But that wraps things up, guys. I appreciate you all tuning in. It's been a little over an hour, so we should probably wrap it up here. I got to get these kids off to bed. But we have wide receivers that we did not get to go through, and tight ends. And tight ends are actually insanely interesting this season. We're going to dive deep into that one. So we got to talk about wide receivers because, again, wide receivers are a big concern for us this season. As you see by the running backs, there's a clear drop off right there where we're wanting to make sure that we're coming out with 2 running backs in the first 4 or 5 rounds. But wide receivers are kind of more of a pressing concern this season because things start to get very shaky once you get past T. Higgins and we start to get into this kind of muddied, just FYI, and why tune in next week to, for us to talk about this. We start to get into this muddied area in terms of low end wide receiver twos, where we start looking at, okay, are we trusting Terry McLaurin for a bounce back? What about Devontae Smith? Are we saying okay, well, maybe AJ Brown gets traded. What if AJ Brown doesn't get traded? What if Jalen Hurts doesn't bounce back? What if this pass volume is inconsistent? What if they lean back on Saquon Barkley again, coming off of the lower usage season and more fresh legs? They get back to this run game, and Devontae Smith suffered. When we've got guys like Jalen Waddle sitting there splitting with Cortland Sutton, Mike Evans, can we trust him to make it through an entire season? Christian Watson, can he really step up and assert himself now that Romeo Doubs is gone and be the clear wide receiver 1? Does Green Bay finally commit to a wide receiver 1? Or do we see Jaden Reed have a bounce back? Is Matthew Golden going to press forward. So you get into this Emeka Ibuka, you get into this really weird area with low end RB2s and high end, or low end wide receiver 2s and high end wide receiver 3s. So next week, I'm going to break all of that down for you because we love our guys at the top, but things start to get very sketchy very quickly. And then again, very excited to talk about tight ends because there are so many options for us this season. And that does not even include the potential of our incoming rookies that I am so excited about. But that wraps things up. I appreciate you all tuning in. As always, if you could subscribe to the podcast, the Dear Miss Fantasy podcast, available on all platforms, that would be fantastic. I would appreciate the support. It is through Player Profiler. And then also, if you can make sure to, give me a follow on my YouTube channel. I'll be back live again with you live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. EST. Yes, I'm on Central Time, so I always got to think that through. 8 p.m. EST. And then, of course, I'm dropping videos for you on my YouTube channel all week. But appreciate you all tuning in. We'll talk to you again next week. Enjoy March Madness, Sweet 16. I'm excited for that one. Got some betting videos coming out tomorrow. Follow my Twitter if you want to see any of that. But enjoy March Madness. We're closing in on the draft. I will talk to you all next week. Have a fantastic weekend, guys.